Welcome to the Scott and Brandon Show, a show where we entertain the pressing biblical, social, and political issues of today. My name is Scott Jackson, and this is my co-host, Brandon Ulmer. Our aim is to have open conversations about serious topics and to build up the body of Christ in the process. If you're interested in theology, applying scriptural principles to our daily lives, or political and social issues as they relate to Christianity, you'll definitely want to tune in. This is the Scott and Brandon Show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Scott and Brandon Show. I'm your host for today, Scott Jackson, and along with me, as always, is my co-host, Brandon Ulmer. Today we've got an interesting topic to discuss. We're talking about two things that aren't typically talked about together, Donald Trump and unity. People typically perceive Donald Trump to be a very divisive figure. They tend to see him as being not a very unifying individual, but believe it or not, he's got quite a few people backing him up this election cycle, and we're going to get into that. Obviously, we've had the prominent endorsement of RFK, and actually, since then, his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, has also endorsed Donald Trump for president. So we're going to be getting into all of that and what all of that means and why is it important and does it have any bearing on this election cycle and so on and so forth. So right at the top, just want to remind everybody to go ahead and subscribe to the show if you don't mind. Follow the show if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and leave a review and give us those 5 stars, but also write a comment. Make sure to tell everybody what you like about the show, why you like it, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would be able to do that for us and help us grow the show. It helps a lot. So, Brandon, we've got Donald Trump. He's got the endorsement of RFK. He's got the endorsement of RFK's running mate, Nicole Shanahan. And also, he's got the endorsement of Tulsi Gabbard. All three are lifelong Democrats and typically are not perceived to be Trump voters. So what do you think about all that? Just before we dive into anything that we have planned for today, like, what do you think about it?
I wouldn't say it's just them. I've seen on YouTube, like YouTube Reels and other videos of these Democrats that have been lifelong Democrats, and they're just regular people, people. And they're like, I'm switching over. I'm still a Democrat, but I can't vote for Harris because, of X, Y, and Z. I disagree with these policies here, whatever the case is. Or in this case, I said, don't even know what our policies are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are less than, I believe, 70 days out from election day.
Yeah, what's crazy is I think North Carolina starts sending out ballots in the next 2 weeks.
It is absolutely
early voting.
Crazy. Yeah, absolutely crazy. And then you have here, I just looked it up, we're at day 43.
43.
And she has not done a press interview. Now, yes, she did have the little CNN, 20-minute, like a teaser trailer type thing.
Right.
But that really wasn't really, it didn't amount to anything.
The questions were,
the questions were soft. Even, when she pushed back maybe on some questions here and there, we didn't get this really good answers. We got these really broad, vague answers. Like, what are you going to do on day one? Many presidents know what they're going to do on day one. I'm going to issue this executive order here. That's what I'm going to do. She couldn't answer that. She's like, I'm going to continue pressing on and hit these issues, such as, I think one of them was the child care stipend, right?
Yeah, I think she talked about growing the middle class.
Yeah, growing the middle class. Which
that's the day one legislation. I don't know why nobody's signed it yet.
That's just like, what have you been doing for the last,
as a member of the
3.5
middle class,
years?
I'd really like somebody to sign that.
Yes. Middle class is feeling it. We are feeling it. So it's just not her. But at the same time, you've got people that are still going along with Kamala and Walz, and like that's the ticket. That is the ticket. And so I actually had asked my buddy yesterday, who is a never Trumper, and a good friend of mine. And I asked him legitimate. I said, did the recent endorsement from Tulsi Gabbard and Kennedy sway you in any way whatsoever? It's just like, no, it did not. Right? And he has his hardline pointers of where he stands with Trump and so forth there. And, I respect that. And, those points are valid. They're valid points.
Sure.
And so, it's hard to say, honestly, is there the huge shift toward unity, or is it still, as the polls show, neck and neck? I don't know. I
Yeah,
do not
a
know.
lot of the polls, and I think since polls have a tendency to lean in favor of the Democratic candidate,
They
just
do.
like, and one big reason why I cite this is it was really, really evident when Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton. So, like, I'm pretty sure maybe a week out from election night, they had Hillary Clinton up double digits as far as national polling over Donald Trump. I'll have to go back and find the exact poll, but since then, I've kind of been of the opinion that polls are meant to shape your opinion, not reflect your opinion.
They are. They absolutely are. Is why you can't trust them. But at the same time, it's hard to then gauge the map of the land.
Yeah. Unless
Is it
somebody
really?
goes out and polls every single person that voted in the 2016 and 2020 elections, we're never going to really have a good gauge as to what's going on. But typically, polls lean in favor of the Democratic candidate. Right.
Although, if you go back and you look up the 2016 results, just Googling the YouTube videos on CNN when they said Trump, it is still so epic to watch. It's still so epic to watch.
It is funny. But I say that to say the fact that Kamala Harris isn't up on Donald Trump by double digits right now is cause for concern, I think, for the left.
That's a good point. That's a
Just
very good point.
Because polls are so bent towards the left, unless you're looking at like Rasmussen or something like that, most of your polls, if Kamala Harris was really doing as well as everybody is wanting you to think that she's doing, she would have Hillary Clinton numbers right now. And she doesn't. She didn't get a single point boost from the DNC. As far as I'm aware right now, as of today, Monday, September 2nd, she has not gotten a single point boost from the DNC, which is strange because typically the candidate accepting the nomination will receive a little bit of a boost post-convention, right? Yep. Republican and Democrat. It happens on both sides. And Kamala Harris does not. She doesn't, which is very interesting to me. So I do think that Kamala's lackluster poll numbers, so to speak, and I only say lackluster because she's not blowing Donald Trump away like the media is wanting you to think that she is. So, you see news articles talking about how good she's doing and how much everybody loves her. And every now and again, the mainstream media will find a former Trump supporter that comes over to Kamala Harris and, they're going to milk that and make it seem like the one person that they talk to is speaking for the majority of Republicans.
Yeah.
And it's just not true because they never talk about like we're going to talk about today, all the Democrats that are coming over to supporting Donald Trump, and not even just explicitly Democrats, but there's a lot of independents that just don't like Trump. Maybe their values lean more towards the right of center, but they just can't get behind Donald Trump, which I understand. Donald Trump essentially has a ceiling as far as his favorability rating is concerned at like 48%. Yeah. I mean, he's never going to get over 50. His polling has never gotten over 50% favorability, which is fine. But the thing is, Kamala Harris hasn't either. And her favorability rating, she had the lowest favorability rating of any vice president ever. I think her lowest was at like 28%. And now all of a sudden she's viewed favorably by, I think 47% of Americans.
Yeah, I think I had the 538 poll up here a second ago. If I can find it here. Well, this one says, do Americans have a favorable or unfavorable? So she's got a 47% unfavorable and a 46.1% favorable.
That's interesting. Do you have Donald Trump's favorability rating in front of you?
Yeah. Let me go back here because I have his up too. Let's see what Donald Trump is at. So Donald Trump is at currently a 52% unfavorable and a 43% favorable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then
This was as of September 1.
yeah,
So a day
and
old.
if you're looking at another poll that I look at, it's not really a poll. It's more so kind of a betting market thing. Is Polymarket, and according to Polymarket, as of this morning, Donald Trump is up on Kamala Harris 50% to 47% as far as the 2024 election forecast.
Wow.
Just likelihood to win the election as far as the betting population is concerned. They're betting on Donald
There
Trump.
was a
right now.
video, I still have to find it, but it was of CNN, and the main reporter was actually in a frantic state because it showed in the polls, and it was based upon 538 polls, that if the election was held that day, Trump would win and secure the presidency. And that was just flabbergasted, the CNN anchor, because they were like, this is not a good thing for us, right?
Yeah, right.
Kamala's not inching at all. She's not progressing at all. And, even though it's hard to exactly, get a lay of the land in the map, is there this general or huge shift, this unity, to come under president? Is it actually happening? Is it occurring?
Yeah.
It's hard to
tell, honestly.
It is hard to tell. But if it is, right, it makes me do one, and I said this, and I don't know if I think I said this to you before when we talked, and this was obviously years ago. Trump lost in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what if, Trump lost in 2020 was a God divine thing, right? Because God does direct the heart of the king. He does determine the paths, right? He does determine the steps, and he does do these things. And I'm not advocating that Trump is the savior of America. I'm not one of those, say, hardcore Trumpers. That Trump gets in, America is saved. If Trump doesn't get in, then lost. I don't lie in that position right there. I do firmly believe, though, that Trump is, has been established. And if he does get put in, then he's been established like that. Scripture is very clear on this.
Yes, it
Romans
is.
chapter 10. Right? Whatever authority and whoever's in that position, God has firmly established.
I was actually just looking for that verse. It's Romans 13:1 for anybody who's wondering.
And I was actually thinking, what if, though, he was being saved for such a time as for 2024? Again, not to be the savior, but to be more so of, hey, this is my warning to you guys as a nation. It's time to wake up, or if you don't, I'm going to give you what you need. And in Israel's case, it wasn't good. It wasn't a good thing. And God finally just gave them what they wanted and evil too.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying Kamala's evil, but I'm just saying.
I'll say that.
And generally, specifically.
At least the stuff that she supports and propagates is
that
evil.
is true.
So
that is true.
I think a fruit by its tree, and
that is true.
A tree by its fruit. I said that the wrong way. I was pulling our notes back up when I was talking. I do think the stuff that she propagates and the stuff that she promotes is evil, such as abortion up to birth, those kinds of things. I think Christians should have major problems with those, as we've discussed in the past.
So one of the, and I didn't have too much, I guess, knowledge on it because I haven't researched it so much. But Trump and supporting or having the government support in vitro fertilization.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much on it. I heard the clip of Trump saying that, should he win the presidency, federal government would make it required. Either the federal government would pay for it or make it required for all insurances to cover full cost as far as IVF is concerned.
Yeah, it is to be free. Question is, though,
because
how
in his words, we want more babies. That's what he said.
Yeah.
We want more babies.
So this is one of the issues, that my friend did bring up, supporting, obviously in vitro fertilization and government control over plans and things of that nature and so forth there. And I get it. right? If you are a constitutionalist and a conservative, right, the last thing you want, even Donald Trump, is government overreach.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so I could definitely see on that one. And there's things that obviously Trump, not to mention his personality, that certainly rubs people definitely the wrong.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I think as far as like the government overreach thing is concerned, I think the only reason why Donald Trump even suggested that IVF policy, or at least implying that the government would make it required for insurances to cover IVF procedures, is because the Harris campaign is literally going out right now saying Donald Trump wants to end IVF treatment. And so obviously they're saying these false things about him. Donald Trump's solution in his mind is to just go out and put an end to it once and for all and just say, like, look, when I get in, I'm just going to make it required to be paid for and end that so that they can't use that anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, speaking objectively, Donald Trump has said some things that has rubbed me the wrong way this election cycle. He's obviously a Florida resident. He votes in the state of Florida. There is an amendment being voted on this November called Amendment 4, and it would essentially legalize statewide abortion up to birth. Right. So right now, Florida has a heartbeat bill. It's capped at 6 weeks, which I think is great. It's better than obviously anything else. As a Christian who thinks abortion is murder, I would like to see abortion just completely banned outright. 6 weeks is a good start. Donald Trump, I think he said in an interview that he thought it should be more than 6 weeks. Now, it did come out that he was going to be voting against Amendment 4, which would, again, legalize statewide abortion up to birth. But there was a little bit of speculation there when, he was asked just outright if he would be supporting or not supporting Amendment 4. And he said, well, I think there needs to be more than 6 weeks. It left a lot of the pro-life crowd, and myself included, with weird feelings. Now, I think you have to take Trump with a grain of salt. I think you have to understand that Trump just kind of says whatever comes to his mind without really filtering it very much. Do I think Trump is smart? Yes, I do. I do think
he's definitely business smart.
He's definitely very business smart. Do I think he's a political genius? No, I don't. And I think he just said whatever, because he said in a rally later that day, I believe his quote was, we support abortion in the extreme cases of like rape and incest or whatever. And he's like, that's all we'll give or whatever. So, implying that those are the only exceptions that he would be willing to concede. So it's just, I do think you have to take Trump with a grain of salt. His comments about Amendment 4, I don't really think you can take very seriously because, again, he came out and said that he was voting against it. So it's just, it is what it is. Donald Trump is kind of a loose cannon. He's unfiltered. And that's why a lot of people don't like him. But it makes it very interesting at the people that he has around him, just to kind of bring it back to kind of what we're discussing today. It's a very interesting divide that's going on right now, and I kind of noticed this when Tulsi Gabbard came out and endorsed Donald Trump, because I was like, okay, RFK, Nicole Shanahan, Tulsi Gabbard, a bunch of local and state politicians are coming out and supporting Donald Trump. I think you had sent me an article earlier this week saying that was it a state rep or was it
it's
a national
state rep?
Okay, so a Texas
Sean
state
Theory.
rep. Yeah,
Sean Theory.
Sean
and she
Theory.
is, she switched from Democrat to Republican Party.
Yeah, which is very interesting. I think the reason why she switched is kind of, again, illustrating this divide that there is between the Republican and the Democratic Party in the United States right now. Essentially, you have one party that is promoting foreign wars, endless funding for American, with endless fundings, like the Ukrainian war, whatever your opinion is on that, and if America should continue to give funding or whatever, that's fine. My opinion is there seems to be no end in sight. Like, when are we, when's enough, right? So, you have one party who wants to support foreign wars and endlessly fund them with our tax money, the money that we pay in taxes. Has the backing of the institutions such as the CIA, Big Pharma, the entirety of the mainstream media complex, and they seem to no longer believe in primary elections. They have anointed their candidate that they're running on the Democratic side of the aisle, and so you have that side of the political aisle, and then you have the other side, which is getting more starkly contrasted with the left as days go on. Is you have the right side of the aisle, which is being brought together by top political minds in the country, accepting people from multiple different viewpoints and multiple different sides of the aisle, such as RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, those are just the most prominent ones. This is why I keep mentioning them. And they seem to be just setting aside disagreements on minor things for the good of the country, which I think is important. I think that is what needs to be happening right now. And the fact that all of this is happening under Donald Trump is honestly, it's kind of funny to me. The left wants to promote Donald Trump as the most divisive president of our lifetime, which I don't think he is. I have my own opinion about that. But the fact that we have all of these people from all of these different viewpoints coming together behind Donald Trump's candidacy, I think is telling as to which party is actually the party of the people. And you can have your own opinion. Obviously, all of this is my own opinion, and this is our podcast, so I can say what I want. If anybody else has a different opinion, send us a message, and we'll have you on the show. Yeah. So all of that, I found that very fascinating to me. What say you? What do you think about all that? I've ranted for a long time.
No, I mean, I would agree that there is this. We're definitely on a fork in the road, and this is really going to determine, yes, the trajectory of the nation. Could we still say Kamala wins and America still exists and we'll be here and it's not the end of the world type thing, as those on the right are proclaiming? Yeah, certainly, right? I mean, history has shown, right? I said I remember when Romney lost, and I felt that was the end of the rope for us as a nation, and that we were just going to go under. But I was so intrinsically involved into politics that it was basically my God at that point. And so instead of looking at God who's on the throne, being content with him, I was so devoted to politics. Now I'm not that way, right? I do understand that nations are judged and nations are brought down. I do believe, that is something that, unless a nation repents or it gets to a point where it is too wicked, that God does that. Is the U.S. at that level right now? I do not know for sure. Right? Only God's the judge, right? But I do see the importance of crossing these party lines when it definitely comes to, these issues that are important, and everyone's different. For me, my primary issues is the economic security, and national security. That's different than some other people. Those are not their top priorities, right? For whatever reason that may be. It may be something else, right? And that drives their decision with me. It is the economy and national security. And so Trump's very strong in those areas right there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and so that what drives me to, yes, throw my vote in him, because those are the two primary issues I am concerned about. Now, obviously, there's a lot more. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's right or wrong in those. I would have to study those policies more in depth. But when we're seeing, I guess the only way we would truly know, we will truly see this great shift, or this unity that is coming across here for Trump, is going to be in November.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and like you I think rightly pointed out, sure, there's policies that Trump supports and things that Trump says that I might not disagree with or that I might not agree with. One thing that is, I think, an important thing to flesh out is the fact that Donald Trump has been president before.
Yes.
And there's not really a big question mark as to how he's going to govern, right? So we know how Donald Trump feels about immigration and his immigration policy. We know his foreign policy. We know his economic policies. And we've experienced them all before. Like, I had a conversation with a fellow Christian who was a never Trumper one time. And this was maybe a month or so ago. And I just flat out, I've been friends with this guy for a long time. So I just flat out asked him, like, what are you afraid of with Donald Trump? Like, why are you so against voting for Donald Trump? And he gave kind of the I would say typical leftist argument of, well, we just can't trust somebody who's that irrational and that sporadic and that unpredictable with the nuclear codes. And I'm like, you mean the codes he had 4 years ago? Like, he was just going on and on and on about how he's erratic and you can't really tame him, and he doesn't listen to anybody, and he could potentially push the big red button at any time and just send the whole world into nuclear war. To which my response was, and still would be, well, if that was going to be the case, why didn't he do it when he was president? I mean, if you truly think Trump is that erratic and that untamed and that unfiltered, that he's just going to go off the hinges and start nuclear war, why didn't he do it when he was in the Oval Office the first time? So, because you can't make the argument of, well, he knew he was running for re-election and he didn't want to hurt his chances of being reelected by starting nuclear war, and also say that he is unpredictable, erratic, and can't be tamed, so to speak. I don't think you can make those two arguments at the same time. Either Trump plays 4D chess or he does not, and I think he
Yeah,
does.
as a matter of fact, if I'm correct in this, because this was with FDR, in a major war like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Obviously, chaos is going to erupt all over the world. I believe that does lock him in during a
Yeah,
period of major war. So
right.
that would honestly secure his president. I could be wrong on that, but I know FDR was able to stay in for 3 terms.
Yeah, I think he would have to declare martial law or something like
So
that.
yeah, it would have to be So I'd have to go back and look at that, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
that would go, along the lines that would secure him. I mean, automatically, right? If he was this erratic person, matter of fact, Trump is anti-war.
Yeah, and like it or not, he's the only president in I think if my memory serves me correctly, he's the only president in the last 40 years that hasn't started a new war. And I mean, like it or not, that just is what it is. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
And this isn't like, oh, all the Democrats start the wars and all the Republicans don't. No, that's not true.
They both do.
They both do. And the fact that Donald Trump didn't, I think, is telling. I think that's something that should be recognized. And I think if you are on the left side of the aisle and you're honest with yourself, you have to recognize this. That, okay, you guys say that you're afraid of Donald Trump starting this massive nuclear war or maybe getting us into a massive conflict with Russia or China or whoever. He didn't the first time. And I think I really do think that's a legitimate argument to people who are saying, well, Donald Trump's going to do this. Donald Trump's going to do this. Donald Trump's going to do this when he gets in office. And responding with, well, did he the first time? I really think that's as valid of an argument as asking Kamala Harris, when she's proposing all of these policies, the few policies that she has proposed, why don't you do it now? And I think both of those things are important to see. But, one benefit that I think we have with President Trump is the fact that we know how he's going to govern. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, we also know how she's going to govern. One thing that I found very interesting in her interview with Dana Bash on CNN is Dana Bash was asking Kamala Harris about her flip-flopping on policies. Specifically, fracking came up. She said in 2019 that she would do everything that she could to ban fracking when she got in office.
And now
And
she's
now,
saying she's not.
and now all of a sudden she's saying that she's not. And Dana Bash asked a legitimate question. Where she went wrong is she didn't ask a single follow-up question the entire interview. Because one follow-up question would have just deflated her whole candidacy. Honestly, it's just
And then she would have started laughing and giggling.
Yeah. But she asked her about fracking, and she said, well, in 2019, you said that, should I get elected, that I will do everything I can to ban fracking. Kamala Harris's response was, my positions haven't changed since 2020, and I maintain my positions and I'm true to my word. She never said that she was against banning fracking. She said that her positions haven't changed. And call it mean, call it whatever. I just don't think Kamala is very bright. I'm not being sexist. I don't think Tim Walz is very bright either. So I'll give you both of them. So did she say that thinking she was talking about her current stance? Maybe. Or I think the more likely viewpoint is she's being told what to believe by the people around her and her candidacy to get her elected. She's trying to keep the lies straight. I do think that the lies that are coming out of the Harris-Walz campaign is just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, the thing that we're seeing of the movement of the Democrats that are crossing party lines and now supporting Trump. We also see the same thing on the left, right? And obviously, they are presenting Kamala as a moderate. That is definitely what they're trying to do.
Right, and they did the same thing with Biden.
Yes, they are trying to present her as a moderate. She's a moderate. She's not a radical leftist. And that, we are seeing, and there's been some Republicans that have come out and who've endorsed Kamala. Not to mention, obviously, the evangelicals for Harris. Right? Yeah. And then I see
I want to talk to those guys.
There is this, we have, and I see one of the reasons why, some Christians will not go along Trump because they say, he uses the faith to basically gain the votes. Whether or not that is actually true, only God will be the judge. From what I've heard from very well pastors such as I'm trying to think like Jensen Franklin and Billy Graham's son. I can't think of his name right now. Franklin Graham, right? And that Trump does know the gospel, and he is a Christian. Obviously, he's very baby in the faith. Very, very, very baby.
Yeah, I would say he is, yeah.
And when you're a baby in the faith, I expect you to act like a baby, right?
Yeah.
You're right. As Paul says, you're not ready for the meat. You can only have the milk, right? Right.
Yeah.
I want to give you the meat, but you're not ready for it. You need to stay at the milk, right? And so, he's got to go through this whole sanctification process. But we see here, evangelicals for Harris, right? I mean, you've got Christians who are saying that, supposedly Christians, that are saying that Kamala is the one we got to get. And so there's a shift on both sides. It is really, truly, inherently this election an election on morality and faith.
Yeah, I'd say more so than any election in the past.
Yeah. And let me ask you this:
go ahead.
Is throwing your vote in for a write-in, right? Whether you vote for Kennedy. Kennedy's having issues getting his name off the ballots. He's telling them, take my name off the ballots.
There's two particular states, Wisconsin and Michigan, that are refusing to take it off the ballot.
Which are obviously, swing states. And
just real quick interjection here before you ask the rest of your question. I think in those states, if they're not allowing RFK to be taken off the ballot, that they should not have allowed Joe Biden to be taken off the ballot either. I think that is very hypocritical, and it's very telling as to who's running those states, because they had no problem swapping out the name Joe Biden for Kamala Harris, but they have a big problem with taking off RFK. And that's just my own personal opinion. Finish the rest of your question. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. So, is throwing your vote away, essentially, is that a win for Kamala?
So I've wrestled with that question.
I mean, essentially, that's what you do. Yes, it is your constitutional right to
Right.
vote for
You're
whoever.
allowed to vote for whoever you want.
It is your constitutional right. But I know people who, in a sense, are, I would say, I'm not saying wasting their vote because they can vote for whoever, but they can vote for somebody else that's obviously not the two primary candidates, and that's a constitutional right. But at the same time, they're getting, I will say, assaulted by people who are Trumpers, right,
Mhm.
or leftists for Kamala, obviously criticizing them, but they are voting according to their conscience. They
Yeah.
cannot, on good faith, either vote for Kamala or vote for Trump, and so they have to go with what they firmly
Somebody else.
believe.
Yeah.
Yes, and so they're getting attacked and visceral for that. But at the same time, is it the is one throwing their vote?
I would say logical answer to that is yes,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's a write-in. Now, there's a difference in voting your conscience and claiming that a write-in is not throwing your vote away because you're still technically casting a vote. Realistically speaking, America has two primary parties. We have for a long, long time. Voting for specifically a write-in, I think almost certainly is ensuring that your vote really doesn't have any sway in the election. And I think the fact that the Republicans haven't won the popular vote in the country since Reagan is almost certainly, handing your vote to Kamala Harris. So it's not a vote for Harris, but it's not a vote really. I mean, it is technically a vote against her, but it's not a vote for her direct competition. So if you're not voting for her competition, you're voting for her, essentially, is what it is, because she's on the left side of the aisle. The Democratic Party is a well-oiled machine. They have been for 50 years. And even if you're voting for somebody like RFK, a very prominent third-party candidate, I don't think your vote is going to have much value. Now, am I going to condemn you for voting your conscience? No, absolutely not. If voting for Donald Trump genuinely, and this would take some soul searching and an honest look at your own heart. If it genuinely violates your conscience to vote for Donald Trump, then don't. I think Scripture's pretty clear about violating your own conscience and doing what you believe is sinful. Now that illustration is as it relates to food and stuff like that, but I think it can be applied to politics as well. And Brandon, if you have a different opinion, then feel free to weigh in. I do think and like I said, it's going to take some soul searching, because Donald Trump, truly, if you don't love him, you absolutely hate the guy. And there's really no in between throughout the country. So that's why I say, if it genuinely violates your conscience, then as a Christian brother, I'm not going to tell you you have to vote for Donald Trump and violate your conscience. Now, as a conservative in this country who is voting for Donald Trump, would I want you to consider voting for Donald Trump? Yes, I would. But I'm not going to force you as a Christian brother or sister, I guess, to cast your vote behind Donald Trump if it genuinely violates your conscience. And I think that's something that has to be prayerfully considered before you just say, well, I don't like the guy, so it's violating my conscience. I think there's a few things that you need to look for if you feel genuinely guilty and like you're going to be sinning if you vote for Donald Trump, that's your prerogative, and that's up to you. I do think, however, this is why I've said ever since we brought up the group Evangelicals for Harris, that I would love to talk to one of them, because I really don't see how a Christian can vote for Kamala Harris. I do think there's an argument to be made that a Christian is able to vote for Donald Trump without, going against any biblical principles. I don't see the argument for voting for Harris. Just honestly, if not for her stance on abortion alone, I don't see how a Christian can vote for Kamala Harris. I just don't. Now, am I going to call you not a Christian for voting Kamala Harris? No, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna call your salvation into question. That's for the Lord to judge, obviously. But do I know what the Bible says about murder and how God feels about children? Yeah, I do. And I don't see how you get past the radical view on abortion. I just don't. What say you on that whole topip? What
No,
do you
I would,
the whole topic? The question
I,
that you to me as well.
I would certainly agree, and I would even throw in there her view and support on Israel.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, that's another one.
And
We talked about that last week.
Yeah, as a Christian, right? That we are to pray for the peace of Israel, right? And God's obviously going to take care of Israel, but we must remember Israel is the only nation in the Bible that's promised to exist forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the only one.
Right.
The only one that God's made a covenant with. It's the only one that He says, I'm going to stick with you through thick and thin. Whether you're sticking with me, that is the only nation, right? And God says very clear, I'm going to bless those who bless you. I'm going to curse those who curse you, right? And if you decide to leave Israel, hanging in the balance and not supporting Israel in what they are doing, right? And maybe even participate, not saying we would ever attack Israel, but by not stepping in and telling these nations that are a threat to Israel to back down, right? Trying to make these peace agreements. I think trying to make this treaty treaty between Hamas and Israel that the U.S. is heavily involved in is, in one way, consenting to Israel being attacked again and again. And Netanyahu knows that. He knows that very clearly, which is why he's going to eradicate them. He is hell-bent on eradicating them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you're going back to your question there. Kamal's made it very clear. She doesn't like Israel.
Yep. Yep.
She had the opportunity to definitely show that by bringing Shapiro in. She does not.
Yeah.
Right? And so then that begs the question, how can you as a Christian vote, but also how can you as a Jewish person or an Orthodox Jew, that I'll always say that, all right?
Yeah.
An Orthodox Jew, how can you vote for someone who has said just publicly they'll support Israel, but when it has come down to it, they really haven't. They haven't shown at all or displayed that.
Right. Yeah, and I think something that's interesting is, and I'm only quoting Ben Shapiro because he is an Orthodox Jew, and I think what he has to say about this is of more validity than myself saying that Orthodox Jews have no business voting for Kamala Harris. Donald Trump made a comment that if a Jewish person is going to vote for Kamala Harris, they need to have their, quote, head exam. And Ben Shapiro talked about this on the show maybe a couple weeks ago whenever Donald Trump said that. And Ben Shapiro seems to think that Donald Trump is correct. If you are an Orthodox Jew and you're planning on voting for Kamala Harris, you should have your head examined. That's a very brutal way. It's a very Trumpian way of saying something, but Ben Shapiro seems to agree with it. And as an Orthodox Jew, I would take his opinion. Not mine. Yeah, so I guess back to the voting for a third-party candidate, casting your vote for a write-in. I mean, what do you think about that? The way you phrased it, I'm assuming you think it's a throwaway vote, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I certainly again agree that, I do not want you violating your conscience, right? And throwing your vote away also brings out the connotation that the election is deciding the fate of the nation. And obviously, definitely right wingers. Your hardcore right wingers are, I would say, are probably the ones who started that argument, using that as an argument, right?
That's probably
in order
true.
to secure Trump getting in. Right? And I get it. I get that why that was being done. At the same time, right? Because I fell for it. I fell for it. But if you truly believe that you're going to violate your conscience by voting for Trump, so therefore you do a write-in, vote for, whoever else, right? Or one of the other candidates that was running. There's still other candidates that I've known that talk to people on this. I'm voting for them, even though they've already dropped out and they've conceded, and
Yeah.
they've dropped out of the race. And you're gonna still put their name in. I will say that's throwing a vote away, in my opinion. It is, because they're done. They've already said they're done, and you're still going to vote for them. I get that, you don't want to violate conscience. I do firmly respect that. So, like I said, I'm not going to, shame you or criticize you for doing that. That is definitely a constitutional right. But at the same time, there's only two candidates running.
Yeah.
And you will just not even vote, honestly. I mean, if it really truly violates your conscience at that point, just don't vote.
Yeah,
Just
I
don't
think
vote.
that's the logical end to the argument of
You're trying to pacify your civic duty as an American to vote, but then you're voting for somebody who's dropped out of the race.
Right. Well, and I think the
Just
likelihood,
don't vote.
and just for Christians who are maybe wrestling with this topic, the likelihood of finding a candidate that is going to 100% align with every viewpoint you have and your opinion on every policy is slim to none. And if you are holding your political candidates to your personal standard on politics, you're probably never going to vote in any other election ever. And that's like I said, your prerogative. I don't claim to agree with everything Donald Trump says. I claim to agree with him on a lot of the major things. And I mean, like, that kind of goes back. We talked about this maybe a couple weeks ago about should a Christian be president? Should the United States go to sort of a Christian nationalism type government where it is a Christian country, Christian run nation, where a nation is run by the biblical laws? For more on that topic, you can see, I think it's maybe our third or fourth episode. I can't remember. I'll put it in the description. But we did talk about this topic of like a theonomy. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about today. Is if you're a Christian, you have a hard time voting for Donald Trump or whoever. I would really examine like what you're looking for in a political candidate. I talked to a friend of mine this week about the endorsements of RFK for Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and those types of things. And one thing he said to me that I found interesting was, because he's been a never Trumper. He has major disdain for Donald Trump. Has not liked him at all since he came on the scene in 2016, and I've known this man since 2016. And he said that the things he looks for, now he's a Christian, he's a pastor here locally. The things he looks for in a political candidate is, I believe he said, let me pull it up here so I don't misquote him. He said that, essentially, while I'm looking for it, he said that what he looks for in a political candidate is national security and how the presidential candidate is going to treat the people that are least in the society, right? So like the homeless, your immigrants, that kind of thing. Now, me and him don't agree on immigration policy. He has a much more liberal view, as far as I'm aware, on immigration policy than I do, which again is what it is. I'm not throwing shade at anybody for that. But I did find it interesting how, you mentioned somebody that's been a never Trumper, that, their opinion hasn't changed with the endorsements of RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. I talked to two people that really weren't big fans of Trump. One was a staunch never Trumper, and one was a reluctant Trump voter for the past two elections. Kind of a better of the two evils kind of thing. Both of them seemed to indicate that, one, these endorsements seemed to matter to them.
I'm sure it does.
And the Never Trumper actually said he was planning on voting for RFK. And Tulsi Gabbard is the only politician that he's ever respected because, he thinks that she's just genuinely honest. He said because of those endorsements, if he does vote this election, it'll be for Donald Trump. And I think, I don't think, and this is all anecdotal. You talked to one who said that, it wasn't going to change his opinion. I talked to two that said it was. I do think these endorsements matter. Like these people, some of the issues they had with Donald Trump, one of them actually, he started out a Democrat. He voted for Obama in 2012, but he's gotten more conservative as time has gone on. He said that Trump isn't conservative enough for him on some issues, such as abortion and things like that. Now, these are both Christians that I talked to, so they're working from that perspective. But the Never Trumper, right? He gave the typical issues with Trump. He's obnoxious. He doesn't like his immigration policy. He thinks it's racist. How he treats other races. And he claims to be Christian, but his fruit doesn't show it necessarily, right? So those were some of the issues that these people had with Donald Trump as a candidate. But when I asked them, does RFK and Gabbard's endorsement of Donald Trump change your opinion on voting for him in this election? One of them responded to me a quote that a family member gave them, and it said, quote, "It doesn't matter if I like Trump or not. The Democrats are like an out-of-control child, and you can't reward a temper tantrum." And thought that was it's humorous. I think the image of the left side of the aisle being like an out-of-control child is accurate.
It is very accurate.
Another one, these are direct quotes from these people. The Never Trumper said that, quote, "Tulsi is one of the only politicians I've ever respected. RFK was who, if I voted, I was going to vote for." He goes on to say, "I have not slept in 3 days because I'm seeing this coalition forming around Donald Trump that I actually might be able to get behind." I know this guy personally, and I know him saying that. In 2016, 2020, I would have never thought I would ever hear those words out of his mouth. So these endorsements do seem to be making a difference because it's allowing people to, okay, if anything, my viewpoints are represented in this administration. Right.
I mean, well, even Katie said, and we've seen it, it's been offered a role in the administration.
Yeah,
I'm sure
part
Tulsi
of the transitional
Gabbard,
team.
Yeah, I'm sure Tulsi Gabbard.
I'm sure she will. I'm sure she will. Well, and I don't know if anybody's listened to RFK's interview with Tucker Carlson. Personally speaking, I find Tucker's show very interesting. But RFK was on there. It was his first interview he did after endorsing Donald Trump. And he talked about how Trump asked him to be a part of his transitional team and picking the people in his administration. And I don't know what role RFK is going to play in the administration. It's been tossed around that he might be recommended to be CIA director. That was tossed around on Tucker's show. RFK seems to think that is very implausible, that the Senate won't let him anywhere near the CIA.
Makes sense.
Which I think, considering his family dynamic,
I could see, because he's a big advocate for it, but children's rights, having him deal with the health crisis as far as the cost of everything is just so ridiculously expensive. Your premiums are so ridiculously expensive.
Yep.
Right? And advocating for, if a parent doesn't want to get their child the what is that? I think it was the HB1 vaccine, hepatitis B vaccine, right? Which is only a disease that can be transmitted through intravenously or through sex.
Through sex, yeah.
But yet we stab our newborn child with it 1 hour after.
Not even 24 hours old.
Yes, within 1 hour after they've been born.
Right.
And why am I giving this vaccine to my kid right now?
Mm-hmm.
And again, Tucker Carlson did an interview with, I forgot their names. Those
Kelly means.
Yes, those two experts. They are experts.
Yep.
In their field.
Yep.
And they're not just a regular doctor. They are like what I would call special forces type
Yeah.
doctors. They
It's
specialize.
fascinating interview.
It's
I'll link it below in the description. It's about 2.5 hours long, but it's worth it.
absolutely fascinating. And so I could see something with that. I could see something like maybe he steps in and he starts, all right, insurance companies, here's what we're going to start doing, right?
Yeah.
But then again, then we're looking at here is that government overreach,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'll be honest, I would love to pay a lower insurance premium. I would
too.
love to pay that,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. I will
So,
say, as you know, I'm 26 years old, so the first election I was able to vote in is 2016 when Donald Trump was running. And so as an individual who's only ever voted for Donald Trump on the Republican side of the ticket, I've never had the opportunity to vote for anybody else. I wasn't too familiar with a lot of RFK's platforms just because I was already decided who I was voting for. And I do have the opinion that voting for a third party is just kind of pointless. I will give it to RFK though. He did have a bigger percentage of polling in a lot of states than I have seen a third party candidate have since I've been politically conscious, so to speak. But one thing that I really like about what he has to say is his absolute passion for children and children's health and ending the chronic health epidemic or the chronic disease epidemic in children in the country. Some of the statistics that he gives in his interview with Tucker Carlson is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. That 75% of people in the United States either have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Blew my mind.
crazy.
Look, vaccinations are a touchy subject today. Lots of platforms don't like you talking about them. But what he has to say about vaccinations for children, that kind of thing, it's very interesting. And the stuff that's in food and everything like that. I mean, he is genuinely passionate about the subject, and truly listening to what he had to say on Tucker's show was eye-opening, to say the least. And I can totally get behind a lot of what he's saying in regards to these issues. And I think the fact that he has come behind Donald Trump and Donald Trump is actually receptive to his endorsement. And RFK makes it pretty clear who was pushing him out of the election. It wasn't Donald Trump. It wasn't the RNC. It was the Democratic Party. They were actively pushing him out of the election. I said this last week. If the Democrats were smart, when they were wanting to jump ship from Joe Biden, they should have just called RFK and said, like, hey, do you want to be our candidate? If they were just going to appoint somebody, they could have just done that. I do think the party could have centralized around any candidate as fast as they did Kamala Harris. I think Kamala Harris was the knee-jerk reaction because she's the vice president, and it would look the best. Like, the optics would be the best because she's like next in line, as opposed to if they appointed anybody else. But I really do think RFK's endorsement has some weight. And I know we're getting close on time, but like this election, and I'll throw this to you. This election feels a little bit different than the last few elections that we've had, just in my personal opinion. It feels like there's a lot more at stake, but I feel like that happens every election now. Like, every election is the most important election of all time.
They said it in 2020. They said it in 2016.
Right. Why do you think, if you do think, why do you think this election is so important?
Well, like I said earlier on this episode, that I wondered when Trump lost in 2020 that he was going to be needed for 2024 more so than 2020, and God knew that, and God has now established, all right, here is this. This is what they advocate for, right? And you have the one side over here, you have Trump. Now, again, Trump is not a full-blown, I will say, hardcore Christian conservative, right? He's not, and I'm not advocating that God is, establish him as savior. But there is definitely a clear distinction between the two. On the one hand, you do have Trump, who wants to put America first, American policies first, that wants to establish the nuclear family, not destroy the nuclear family, because the nuclear family is the foundation, it is the backbone of any nation and society, right? And one who wants to protect our nation, whether from foreign wars or through an invasion from the southern border, right? Who wants to fight the war on drugs that keep coming in and destroying families, right? Who wants Americans to keep more of their paycheck and actually use it for good, as far as going on a vacation, just going on that, or just paying your bills, right? So you have this, right? Which along the lines, right, goes along with scripture as far as, right, if you're wise with your money, it's a good thing in Proverbs, right? If you're, a nation that does not have wise advisors, it goes down, right? And so on the left, you said, let's just open up our borders. Let's just, let's kill our children, right? Destroy the nuclear family or prevent the nuclear family from establishing. There's these clear lines of things that I see here that when it comes to the Bible's very clear, right? And Trump leans more toward the biblical side of things on these issues. Obviously not everything. He's not perfect, and I don't expect him to be perfect. But I think so that with this election, going back to the question, I will say it is very important. We have right now 2 wars going on and a potential third.
Yeah.
That is ready to start. It is ready to start, and they're just waiting to see who is going to win and secure the presidency before they actuate. And that's China.
Yep.
And that's going to have a huge impact. It is going to have a huge impact. And that's what I said. That when you look at our economy, you look at our debt, you look at the wars that are currently going on, and it's ready to start. It's not a matter of if it's going to start, it's when. That is the question.
It's just a matter of when.
It's when is it going to start? In my opinion, Trump is the guy to navigate this war.
Yeah, I would agree.
And, I mean, it's not appropriate language, but Trump is ballsy, too, to deal with. And he said it himself. President Xi, he's a tough man. He is a tough man. Vladimir Putin, tough man. Netanyahu, tough man. Right? The enemies of Israel are tough.
Tough men.
These are tough men. I'm not saying a woman can't go head to head with them. It's not Kamala. I would agree. Tulsi Gabbard, I would have not. I could see her going up against these men, and she'd stand her ground. I believe she was a former lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
That's not Tulsi. That's not.
It's not Kamala.
Not Kamala.
Yeah, and I've said before that would I be against voting for a woman president? No, if she's genuinely the most qualified person in the field. But I'm not going to vote for someone because she's a woman. And I really do think, you can call it what you want. If Kamala Harris was a white man, she wouldn't be anywhere near the White House. Just her incompetency level. Genuinely speaking, she's very politically incompetent. She has only failed upwards, and she's only been given higher positions because they want to get her out of the current positions that she's in. I heard something, and this will be one of the last things we say. We can cut it off after this. There was a time in the middle of the Biden-Harris administration where they were genuinely thinking about appointing Kamala Harris to the Supreme Court to get her out of the vice presidency. Do you remember this?
I do remember that.
That was wild to me. And you were like, someone is so bad at their job, you just want to try to give them a different job
You would
to
give them
get
like
them out of their current job.
one of the most powerful positions
Yeah.
in America.
Yeah. And I think
That doesn't end until you either
No.
retire or die.
Right. And I think an important thing to look at is you had people on the left side of the aisle talking about Joe Biden's terrible debate performance, saying that you can't allow 3.5 years of progress and a 3.5 year long track record be negated within 90 minutes. I would say that the inverse is also, if you're going to use that standard, I think you have to apply it to Kamala Harris as well. But I think it's the opposite that you would have to apply, is the last 90 minutes of her candidacy. You cannot allow that to blind you from the 3.5 years that she has actively been and still is the vice president of the United States. The fact of the matter is, Kamala Harris could invoke the 25th Amendment today and get Joe Biden out of office and do absolutely everything she's saying she wants to do. You know, she's saying every day, I'm going to do this on day one. I'm going to do this on day one. She can do it all now. She can do it all now. And I don't think there's a question on how she's going to govern. I think we saw all of her opinions and viewpoints in 2019 when she was running for president. And we've seen her viewpoints for the last 3.5 years as being the vice president. I guess a parting word, I would say, you know, because we always want to try to approach these topics from a biblical lens and a biblical perspective, is if you are a Christian out there and voting for Donald Trump feels uncomfortable, one, I understand. Two, I would ask you just to prayerfully consider it. You know, the Never Trumper that I mentioned earlier is doing just that, prayerfully considering voting for Donald Trump. These endorsements help a lot with getting him there. But I think it's important to do that with any tough decision, and you should pray about anything. I mean, this is, like it or not, this is the country that we live in, and this is the country that we're tasked with voting in and voicing our opinion on. But I would implore you to just look at Kamala Harris's stances on things that are overtly opposed to biblical principles, such as abortion, LGBTQ ideology, her stance on Israel. I think those three things specifically, her viewpoints on those are explicitly anti-biblical. They are directly against what Scripture promotes, and I think that's an important thing to consider. So, like I said earlier, with anything, prayerfully consider whoever you're going to vote for. I would say that there's a harder case to be made for Christians to vote for Kamala Harris than there is for Donald Trump. This is not me telling you who to vote for. This is just me looking at what the Bible says about some of the issues that these candidates are talking about. And I do think there's some deal breakers, such as abortion. I think that's a big one. I have rambled on enough. Brandon, do you have any parting words for the people watching and listening?
Yeah, no, I'd say I would agree. So, definitely prayerfully consider and seek the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you should cast your vote.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Again, if you don't mind, go ahead and follow, subscribe to the show, leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. Go ahead and leave a 5-star review and maybe write something in there as to why you like the show, what you liked about it, and let us know, and share the show if you don't mind. It helps us greatly, and we'd love to continue growing this thing as time goes on. So thanks everybody. Have a good day, and we'll catch you next week.